So, Bludgeoner has always seemed like a really cool skill to me, and I've always wanted to use it because I thought it was sort of like a spiritual counterpart to, like Protective Polish or Handicraft or something, where like those skills want you to be in your maximum sharpness color range for as long as possible. So I always figured Bludgeoner would be kind of like the opposite of that, and it would want you to stay in the minimum sharpness levels, like red, orange, yellow, green. But I guess it doesn't actually really work like that. It just kind of provides a flat boost to attack at the lower levels of sharpness. And I haven't really done any of the number crunching, but when I was considering using it during my playthrough of Rise, and I did some basic testing in the training room with it, and I remember it pretty much just being always better to just have the higher sharpness and use those, skill point investments into other methods of raising your attack if you wanted that. So yeah, to me it's always sort of just been a skill that seemed like it could be really cool, but was something I could never really justify putting on. I think the intention behind it is maybe to just provide a little bit of a buffer to your attack, on weapons that have naturally low sharpness, so they get down to green, orange, yellow really easily. And so you get sort of a buffer on those colors' sharpness because it provides a way for them to compete with weapons that have got like purple and stuff like that. But I don't know, I've never really gone into that route of what is it called, like builds. I've never really gone that way and thought about using one of those types of weapons. I've always just used the weapons that look cool to me and they typically have higher sharpness. I imagine it's pretty good for like a lot of the beginner weapons. I guess particularly like weapons that branch off of the bone tree, maybe. But yeah, anyway. So I would like to suggest something to maybe have it be a little more centered around incentivizing you to just destroy your sharpness bar. Just go ham on like attacking. So what would be the best way to work around being or incentivizing being in the lower levels of sharpness? I think the first thing we need to do is get rid of the bouncing problem. Bludgeoner has always sort of been heavily crutched by needing Mind's Eye with it to work properly. Because if you don't have Mind's Eye, then you're just going to be bouncing a bunch when you're trying to fight at the lower sharpness levels of like orange or whatever. So really, Mind's Eye and Bludgeoner should probably just be combined into the same skill under Bludgeoner. And I'll elaborate on this in a little bit. But the next thing that we need to talk about first is damage. The damage of Bludgeoner should probably always be less than, putting investment towards your higher sharpness, because there's a lot more upkeep that goes into keeping a weapon sharp than goes into keeping your weapon dull. It's a lot easier to just let your weapon get dull. So it shouldn't be able to actively just compete with those. It would sort of just be like, oh, we'll just put on Bludgeoner because it's just as good as using skills for staying in max sharpness, and then it's less skill points. So it should always be less than putting investment towards those, just so that it's nice and balanced. And then, so one idea I have is to lower the level of sharpness damage multiplier, like just overall. I'll put some graphics up here so you can see like what I'm referring to. But and then as well as the length of the colors of every weapon just across the board, it cuts down on the chunks of the sharpness color to sort of have them break faster to push you into those lower colors a little quicker. and then have your damage multiplier boost. You can see at the bottom there, you lose a ton of damage near the bottom. So instead of that, you just sort of also have it scale backwards or like scale going down the colors in an upward direction, adding damage as you go down. It would effectively turn Bludgeoner into sort of like an MMO berserker type of class, like a skill that lets you play kind of like that, because you break the colors of sharpness much faster, and you kind of slow down on damage a little bit in the middle, but then once you get into the groove, you start doing more and more damage and constantly just attacking, bashing your weapon against the monster. And then as you're doing that, the more and more you do it, the bigger the benefits are. I have one example of just a way that you can sort of structure it. This is obviously not going to be, I don't know if it's balanced or not, but this is just for the sake of comparison and giving a visual as to sort of what I'm referring to. So you can see the sharpness is, the standard sharpness is red 50, orange 75, yellow 1.0, and so on. You can see it there. So it would look something more like this. And so green is the only one that's the same at 1.05 times your damage. And then you can see that it like scales. They sort of have like matching color pairs. For example, we'll start with like a weapon on purple sharpness. You're going to start with that 1.39. Well, normally it's 1.39, but since we're changing the damage numbers, it's going to be, I just did 5 less on each of them. But so yeah, you start with the 1.34, and then you drop down to white, blue, green, and then once you get back to yellow, it's essentially like you've reversed your sharpness, and now you're getting back into 1.15, 1.27, and then in red, you're 1.34 again. And then you can get the max benefit, and then that kicks in like later into the battle. So, you think back to the berserker, just kind of like bashing your weapon, and the more you get into the groove, the more your sharpness breaks, the stronger you get. I think you have to lower the damage multiplier, because the red bars on sharpness bars are always very long. So being able to stay into the, that red damage multiplier, which is the 1.34, being able to stay in that for that long would be pretty powerful. So in order to keep it balanced, you got to do it like that, to some extent at least. And especially because once you sharpen the weapon, you're going to continue to be in that highest damage multiplier, because then you get back to purple, let's say, and you're still in 1.34 after sharpening. And you might think like, well, I wouldn't need to sharpen if I'm in red, but you technically do, because your red will run out, and then you don't have any sharpness at all. And so I actually don't even really know what happens normally when that happens. Do you just keep doing red damage? I don't know. But my idea for when that happens is, and this is sort of just a way to balance it, once you use up all your red, regardless of anything that you've done, like whatever skills you have, regardless of anything, Bludgeoner takes over. Once you use up that red, you do 0 damage no matter what. All your weapons attacks turn into 0, and every single attack you do bounces. Therefore, you're forced to sharpen and not just be constantly stuck at like being able to do that so much damage for a long time. That's sort of like a little bit of a balance to it. You can sort of think of it as like you've gone overboard, and so you're not able to keep it up for that long. You need to take a little bit of a break. And to sort of further exemplify that aspect of it, you can also say, like, if you do end up getting to that 0 sharpness, using up all the red, you can even apply like a little bit of a debuff, like a attack debuff for 30 seconds or whatever. That way if you don't keep an eye on it, then you're getting punished for sort of going a little overboard. It's sort of like an exhaustion mechanic. And it's also just sort of a way to make people anxious about staying too long in the red bar, because it provides sort of the longest chunk of high damage. I guess that kind of goes against the whole berserker idea, but you do want it to be balanced for the game as well, and sort of be interesting to use and fun. And that adds a little bit of you got to think about it. And then, by the way, in order to make this skill work consistently across the game, you obviously have to scale the damage of the colors to like what your weapon currently has available, because you can't have that maximum red sharpness damage multiplier at the beginning of the game. That would be way overpowered. So let's just say, like, having Bludgeoner active as a skill, just by default turns orange and red into the regular yellow damage multiplier, which is 1.0. But, if you don't have a purple sharpness weapon, then you can't gain the attack boost from red sharpness. And so, each color has their pairing that does the same amount of damage. You have to have that color's maximum. You have to have one color to unlock the other. Blue weapons, for example, will only boost the yellow sharpness. So then once you drop down to orange, you're back down to 1.0 times the damage multiplier. So you're going to want to sharpen to get that damage boost back on the blue, which will then drop down to green. You lose a little bit there, but then you gain boost again on yellow. So it can still work throughout the entire game and at lower sharpness levels. At least lower sharpness levels in terms of like beginning game stuff. And so, I don't know, you might be thinking like, well, wouldn't that just make the weapons with lower sharpness in general, like even at the end game, wouldn't those weapons just be unable to get the maximum benefit of this skill? Yes and no, I would say. The whole point is that I would like the skill to sort of branch out to be usable on all the weapons to some extent. And doing it this way kind of allows that to happen. Because before it was very, very niche type of skill. And this would make it a little more wide range, or like this would give it a wider range of usability. But there is something, even though they can't take full, even though they can't utilize the full extent of the damage multiplying, lower sharpness weapons might still be able to get a little bit of extra benefit out of this skill, and it might still be worth using. I like what Rise did to Mind's Eye, which is it provides an incremental boost to the damage on hard parts with more levels of Mind's Eye. So the more investment you have in Mind's Eye, the higher damage you're going to be doing on like the harder parts of the monsters. So let's attach Mind's Eye to Bludgeoner, and we'll use that mechanic, but let's slightly alter it, because damage is already accounted for within Bludgeoner. So we don't need to worry about damage, but, and this is one of the reasons to sort of have multiple skill points of investment into Bludgeoner, because everything else I talked about was like sort of just base how Bludgeoner works, and then it's sort of scaled by whatever weapon you're using. So let's say that lower sharpness levels, so like orange, red, and yellow, orange, red, whatever. Let's say they also add an extra boost to flinching ability, your ability to flinch the monsters. I don't know, is that even a thing is that a parameter that can be adjusted? Probably is, but I don't know if anything actually does, or if there's any skills that actually do that. But anyway, let's say it adds an extra boost towards your ability to flinch. And, I don't know what a good balanced percentage would be for that, but we'll just give an example here and say, let's say you get a 10% boost at yellow sharpness, you get a 25% boost to it at orange sharpness, and then red gives you a 50% boost to your ability to flinch. And then you unlock one of those per level of Bludgeoner investment. You can sort of just imagine it as like your weapon breaking into like pieces and gaining jagged edges on the weapon. So, since Bludgeoner allows you to also have Mind's Eye and continue to use your weapon and bash it against the monster, and it boosts damage to sort of, be able to constantly do that. So now the monster's just being pelted with shards of chipped weapon, and it's taking damage no matter what. Because before you would just bounce and the monster wouldn't really be able to react too much to that because you're not doing the damage. So if you're doing that damage and you've got like these jagged edges on your weapon, it kind of just makes sense for them to be, more and more likely to flinch the more the weapon's broken and the more jagged edges are on it and more pieces are sort of getting lodged into them. And so yeah, they'd be more likely to flinch regardless of where they're getting hit. And, Mind's Eye lets you hit everywhere, which would be on Bludgeoner. And so then you can go ahead and just like hit monsters on hard parts and be able to flinch them on hard parts, because I think usually flinching is typically easier on the weaker spots of the monsters. And so then there's a massive benefit of being in red. And so the lower sharpness weapons, they might not get access to the extra damage boost on the lower sharpness levels, so they'd be doing 1.0 times damage for those. But they do typically have higher raw damage to compensate for the fact that they have those lower levels of sharpness. So being able to stay for a long time in that red sharpness, 1.0 times their very high raw damage with 50% boost to their flinching ability, that could still be very useful. And because they have low sharpness, they're going to have extra access to that increased flinch chance, because they're going to be able to get down to red a lot more often. Because when higher sharpness weapons get into red and they use up that red they gotta sharpen, they have to cycle through all their colors before they're able to get back down to the red. But lower sharpness weapons, they have a lot less cycling to do, so they're going to get down to the red faster and get that extra flinch. So it's sort of a trade-off. You use a lower sharpness weapon, you get higher raw damage, but probably less overall damage because of the way the scaling works, but then you're going to get more overall flinch ability. And so that'd be really cool. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I sort of just tried to imagine what type of game mechanics could sort of best resemble Berserker just bashing their weapon into the monster with never letting up, and this is sort of what I got out of that. Because when I think of the skill Bludgeoner, I think of this guy. Bone armor, well, they changed it used to be the Hammer's standard armor. They would always show it off with Hammer. Changed it to Hunting Horn for a while, but same idea, right? Hammer, Hunting Horn both just smack the monster over and over again. And so Bludgeoner always reminded me of that. And who else would wear armor like that? Berserkers. Berserkers are always, very, very small amount of armor. And very frequently they'll be seen with like, like pelts and bones around them, because that's just the vibe of a berserker, right? Yeah. I hope you enjoyed the video. Some Wilds news came out, I think today, when I'm recording this. So I'll be talking about that in the next video, especially because there's new stuff regarding both Lance and Insectglaive, the two weapons that I happen to make videos about, which is very funny. And the new stuff is literally relevant to both of those videos that I made. So I'm excited to talk about those. But yeah, I'll see you then. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Goodbye.